Everybody. Welcome, everybody. My name is Eddie Dunn. I am the new interim president for VETS2INDUSTRY. Welcome to a really, truly extraordinary event today. I think this is going to be one of those types of conversations, Ed, where I think this is the start of something beautiful. And I really want to emphasize this particular industry because I think there are a lot of wonderful things going on in the employment space. And not many people actually think about shipbuilding and maritime. And I think this educational webinar is going to go a long way with that. So for those of you on the call today who may not be familiar with VETS2INDUSTRY, we want to welcome you to what we've been doing for the last 7+ years. We have been founded on a centralized theme, the ability to access and bring and aggregate all these free resources into one place, right? For all transitioning service members and their families, right? We are a dedicated group of volunteers, right? That's built VETS2INDUSTRY for a lot of folks that have been in this military space for a long time. Thanks to the generous support of Signal Health Group, we've now expanded our services and we've got some very significant strategies and capabilities. But the one things I want to point out to you today, and of which you're going to see a lot of interesting links in the chat that my partner Carmen's going to put in there, is around the following that could assist you today. One, around monthly events. We are very well known for our monthly events, so we're going to include the links to that. We have networking events, industry-specific events and webinars, in-person resource drives, monthly training webinars. We also have digital engagement platform, right? With regular game streaming sessions, business listing for veteran and military spouses, resume career search assistance, job placement assistance, and the ability to volunteer with us. One of the very cool things about what we do is that we have a volunteer army like nobody else, right? And we do it extraordinarily well. So that's a little bit about VETS2INDUSTRY in a 2-minute drill, but I want you to take advantage of that as we go along today. All right. So I want to introduce our speaker today, Edward Lewis, right? He's a seasoned maritime leader with over 32 years of distinguished service in the Coast Guard. If you've been in the Coast Guard, I would put that in a link. You don't see too many Coasties, Eddie, but Ed, and I'm going to just say Ed because I'm Eddie. I don't want to confuse my own self. But I will tell you, Ed, it's a rare treat to talk to another Coast Guard person, and I've had a few in my career. Ed has been a master chief, right? And shipbuilding assignments include many, many U.S. Coast Guard cutters, the Midget, the Duran, the Spencer, and the Man of War, which I think is pretty amazing. He attained the very high level rank of Master Chief, right? So if you know anything about being a Master Chief, it's very similar to Command Sergeant Major and First Sergeant in the other services, but it is a very well-respected and well-earned area. He's had a number of assignments outside of that. Beyond his operational assignments, Ed has had a pivotal role in shaping the Coast Guard strategy and leadership development. He's been an extraordinary leader in this space as the Command Leadership Advisory Council, and with doing a number of different things in the Outlook Vision team, a 10-year strategy. He's been an active member of Arizona State University Senior Enlisted Advisory Council. I can go on and on and on. He's the graduate of the U.S. Sergeant Majors Academy, Class 57, and he holds a master's degree from one of my favorite universities on the planet, Liberty University. So with that said, I want to turn the space over to you, Ed, and let you go from here.
Awesome. Thanks, Eddie, and thanks, Carmen. Hey, I've just got a couple of goals today, and I've got a very dense PowerPoint. I'm going to violate every rule of PowerPoint that I've ever taught in classes or seen, because I've got really four goals. And when I was asked if I could do this webinar, I thought, yeah, support the maritime industry, support a righteous organization that supports vets and families. Yeah, I could burn time putting some information together. First point to get across, and you'll understand this as we go through. If you're transitioning, I did 32 years. Do not do that alone. And if you're supporting other people that are moving out and are going to retire, transition out. Don't let them do that alone. Goal number one for today is for you to learn more about the maritime industry itself. You know, veterans, spouses into maritime. You kind of have to understand what maritime means. And then I'm going to go off grid, and I've done a lot of stuff in the Coast Guard, a lot of stuff with DoD. Not going to get into all of it, but I want you to know more about who you are, not in the personal sense, like I know who I am, but know who you are in the digital sense and what's actually in records and what we can do with the information in a individual's record. So you know you through the computer lens. And then at the end of that, I want you to see yourself in maritime. And if you're here supporting other people, so you can see other people in maritime and kind of point them in that direction. Like, hey, what's the future look like? So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this works. And run through a few slides. There we go. Eddie, can you see that?
I can.
Okay, awesome. So if we go off grid at some point, just let me know and I will jump back on. So yeah, Ed Lewis, Maritime Institute, here to support VETS2INDUSTRY. And at the bottom, you'll see task force movement. So I'm going to talk about another group. I'm a part of a lot of things, but those are the two predominant organizations I'm going to talk about. I'm an employee of Maritime Institute, but I work with task force movement, specifically in maritime. So what is the Maritime Institute? It's got that big M word. So we're the country's largest maritime training provider for mariners, professional mariners. We do government contracts with the Navy, Military Sealift Command, NOAA. We support union mariners in the unions when they have overflow folks. We can bring them in, do some contract courses. But our key base are professional mariners around the country. That's who we train. People that are going to work on ships in a variety of roles. We're here in Norfolk, San Diego, Alameda, Edmonds, Everett, Washington, Honolulu, and we're out in Guam in PD at Cabris Marine. And then we have about 40 more approved classrooms. So we do exportable training. And all it really takes is pictures of a classroom, and we can fly folks out to do training that meets their needs, including firefighting training with local fire departments. That's us specifically, but as the reason I bring up this school, I want you to think of all of the schools, including community colleges that are servicing the maritime industry at a little bit larger level than just mariner. Task force movement chartered about the time COVID kicked off. The country was really short mariners or truckers, and a group of us that were already working together came together. Task force movement. Patrick Murphy is the chair. Honorable Patrick Murphy. You can look him up. Really focused on bringing truck drivers in when the country was very short. Task force movement has since expanded into cyber. It's all about bringing veterans into industry, and it's all transportation related. So it started with trucking, moved into some of the cyber stuff, moved into aviation, and we're moving into maritime now. Task force movement, since 2023, 750 people have been brought in through that program into trucking, credentialed, gathered another little over $3 million for CDL training through community colleges and some of the truck driving schools, and worked very, very close with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in supporting other programs. It was chartered out of the White House. We were there last July. But a big piece of task force movement is not doing training. It's bringing people together, that, including the American Legion, working hard with the American Legion, working on the authorities, finding the money, DOT, Department of Labor, bringing those groups together, and then running funding for schools if the schools are needed. But it's predominantly veterans and spouse related. Big picture, step back across the room. What is maritime? Because I get asked that a lot. People think maritime is mariners on one side, and then maritime is shipyards on the other side, and they don't pick up the port aspect. So mariner jobs, my world, you're really looking at the merchant marine, people that are sailing domestically up and down the Mississippi River, along the coast, different kinds of logistics ships, cargo ships, ferries that are here domestically sailing in the U.S., and then international ships that are sailing overseas between countries. A couple of different departments. Deck and engineering are the biggest one. Steward, so you have your chefs, your stewards, your cooks, and then there's a finance aspect on most of the international ships managing their budgets. So there's about 202,000 mariners in the United States that are credentialed in some way through the National Maritime Center. There are more that have no license. They just work on boats. And that could be 100-ton masters. It could be, your chartered captain 6-pack license, or internationally sailing unlimited masters sailing container ships overseas. Mariner side, flip that over, maritime, it's the port. It's not the shipyard alone. So you think you bring that ship in from overseas, it's everything in that port connected to the water is maritime. So when you hear things like restoring America's maritime dominance, the EO, the executive order, maritime dominance, it's not just the shipyard. It's not just the guys on the ship, the women working on the ships. It's the maritime workforce itself, everything connected to the waterfront. And when I say everything, we're going to talk about the Navy in a minute, but you may have Navy submarine components that are being built in Tennessee. That's still maritime. It's connected through that port, and those companies are all jammed together. So there's a lot in maritime. Shore-based jobs, I just ran through a list. Equipment operators galore. Longshoremen that handle all the cargo, warehouses, customs inspectors, administrative staffs, crane operators. You get your trades, your welders, electricians, boiler technicians, machinists. But you also have port security in a lot of different fashions. You have cybersecurity all over the waterfront, logistics specialists, finance, supply, you name it, you've got the whole gamut. That also means you have executives in all of those companies. You have managers, you have contractors, and then there's a training and education element behind that. So you have all your professors in the community colleges, you have your instructors, right? So maritime is massive. The harder question is, how do you not find a job in maritime? But if you don't know what maritime is and where to look, you won't find yourself in that industry, in that community. So really think of a map, think of the waterfront and how much stuff is on the waterfront, and you'll start realizing how big maritime is. I'm in Norfolk right now, Hampton Roads, Portsmouth, Tidewater, they call this area. It's the biggest naval base in the world. It's got some of the biggest shipyards in the world. This entire area is maritime related, and most people, even the ones that live here, don't grasp that because they don't work in the shipyard. This whole part of Virginia is rolling in maritime jobs. So I'm going to take a little bit of a step back. That's maritime. Got this big world, water and ports, and all these jobs. And it's pretty fascinating when you think about that, but knowing that it's the waterfront only goes so far. So what you really have to look at, especially as a veteran, is yourself. Who are you? These slides are going to be hard to read. I don't expect you to read them. I just want you to see what's there so we can follow up with questions. This is about the busiest slide I've ever put together. The top row says Coast Guard investment. How does the Coast Guard invest in education for its members? We invest in staff time, funding, materials, equipment, infrastructure, facilities, technology. The Coast Guard investment in education, and I'm speaking strictly about voluntary education, the Coast Guard investment is actually relatively small. When you think of tuition assistance in DOD, across all of DOD compared to their budget, it's a very small investment, but it does take people and it takes resources. If you broke that down and the things you have access to, the second column, tuition assistance, everybody thinks about because it gets a lot of publicity. You have Dante's, you have ACE assessments. They've been around forever. The testing the military pays for And a lot of times in the Coast Guard, other services, depending on the year you're looking at, would pay for CLEP and DSST for spouses to take. It's underutilized. I actually have, I think, 51 or 54 credits worth of Dante's and CLEP test in my background. Can't do anything else. You can always watch movies and take tests. So I used to work at a school. We would give the test out. I handed the material out, and I would just take the material that nobody was using and ended up taking the test. Very inexpensive way to get college credits, and your kids can do that too, by the way. I was a founding member of the Naval Community College, the pilot, along with Toby Howitt from the Navy. He was 7th Fleet Command Master Chief when I was the Coast Guard's District 14. So they brought two CMCs together, one Navy and one Coast Guard, and we started the execution stage of the Naval Community College, and all we really had was go make this thing happen. So Naval Community College is out there. It's a great program and growing. You have the GI Bill. Veterans can use the GI Bill. If they have it, most of them do. Active duty can use it. I prefer, even in our school, we can accept the GI Bill. I try to get people not to use it for technical training, use it for degrees, but it does pay for technical training too. Just make sure you have a mentor helping you with that. C-SPY Academy is a preparatory course to go to the Coast Guard Academy. There are people getting master's degrees paid for by DOD and the Coast Guard. There are pilots that come up. Gleam was one, Naval Community College. Those were pilots. So there's always these off-grid things that we're doing. DOD's doing, Coast Guard's doing. U.S. MAPS tracks hours. A lot of things in maritime require experience, not education. Can't forget about U.S. MAPS. You get to Coast Guard cool, Navy cool, Army cool. Good programs. I'll explain how those work in a minute. Those are there. And then at the very bottom, there's a program called Mill Gears. If you collapsed all of this on top of each other, the data is all rolled into Mill Gears. Extremely valuable program. And this is where we start talking about you not as the human, but data. What could you put in a resume that can be validated? And how do you see opportunity? And how can you learn about what you can do through data in a system? It's an education tool. 2013, way before Mill Gears was occurring, we were working on military to mariner, and I was trying to find a way to explain how you could stack partial classes to get your merchant mariner license. Pretty complicated, but if you think top left, you have boot camp, which most of us went to. You come out with 7 college credits, 7 lower level college credits for going to boot camp. Great, I've got 7 credits. As you go around Machinery Technician A School, MKA School, you pick up 13 lower level credits in that 15-week school. And being an MK3, once you make MK3, because of the experience you get, there's another 7 credits. You also pick up a majority of rating forming part of an engineering watch, RFPEW, your first engineering international qualification for sailing. As you roll around, MTU, Motor Turbine Union, very common school for patrol boats, small cutter damage control, ACNR. They're just sea schools that most services have some kind of advanced training. They're geared towards E5, some E4s get in, some E6s. But you start looking, MTU, 3 lower level credits, damage control 2, air conditioning, refrigeration, 6 lower level credits, ACNR, you come out with a 608 universal air conditioning license if you pass the test at the end, and QMED endorsements, qualified member of an engineering department. All you've done at this point, graduate boot camp, go to a tech school, and go to a couple of C schools. As you roll around, you see helm, lookout, engineering officer of the watch, deck watch officer. What you actually do when you qualify on that first ship is you complete the requirements for rating forming part of a navigation watch. You get almost all the way through qualified member of an engineering department and able-bodied seaman. They call it able seafarer now. Able seafarer and seaman in the military are not the same thing. You can do an entire career as an able seafarer. They make almost $100,000 a year working for Military Sea Lift Command. Radical difference between seaman and able seafarer. So you roll a little bit up and they have LAMS, Leadership and Management School. It's the E5 leadership course. Every DoD service has some equivalent of LAMS. So on the far left, 30 credits at this point. You're an E5. You actually have 30 college credits. You take CLEP, Dante's test. You can have an associate's in sciences in engineering. And I won't say without going to a school. Most colleges require 6 credits by state law to graduate from that school, but you can just about have an associate's if you know how to stack your courses and your experience at E5. On the other side, Coast Guard training and some required civilian courses, because Coast Guard, Navy training, even the Army will not get you all the way to international requirements, but it'll just about close the door. We'll get you to QMed or Able Seafarer, old able-bodied seaman. So an E5, if they know how to stack their documents, can get just about all the way to, and this is experience, a 2-year degree or merchant mariner license, and a pretty significant one. Let's see. So we're going to run through the most complicated things you'll ever see on a computer. This is what I mean by data, and where you need to see yourself the way people that aren't in the military see you. If you look in the HS, and this is across, if you print this out, it's about 7 feet long. On the far left where the orange is at, that's boot camp, and on the far right is E9. Everything that's required for advancement or geared towards the pay grade for corpsmen in the Coast Guard are on this slide. So if you roll back to the far left, it's broken down by a terminal performance objective. So recruit basic training, bi-week through the 8 weeks, terminal performance objectives, apprentice leadership school, which you get when you're an E3, usually in your tech school, corpsman school, 17 weeks. And if you see the top where this yellow, and I know you can't read it, health service technician school, it says certified, and I can't say the word, too much coffee today, phlebotomy technician, CPT. That's where your certifications start popping up based on your experience. It's tied to the school. As you go across, you get your clinics, inter-service physician assistant program starts E4 to E7, or you can go officer candidate. But more importantly, you start seeing the independent duty corpsman schools, MEPS, Hiswells. You pull all these individual tasks out at the course level, and you have a big giant pile of tasks for an individual in a system. E7, E8, E9. What you're doing in effect is mapping an individual's record into Department of Labor's database for credentialing. And I'll show you how to do this without having to see the data behind it. This is 3 different aviation rates in the Coast Guard. So if you're taking a aviation electronics technician and you wanted to turn them into an aviation maintenance technician, rather than guessing what kind of training they have, you could do a vertical slice, look left and find out what they're missing. You could also find out in the middle where their airframe and power plant, their FAA credentials come from and what they have as they progress through individual schools. Underwater egress school, maintenance resource management, emergency medical technician, all these required schools drop master. Where those schools come up, you can find out exactly what civilian certifications align. All of that happened before the line in the middle. That's actually E5. So when you start thinking about where these individuals are at, continue rolling to the right, you have all your advancement requirements. Most of your credentialing calculators only look at advancement requirements. They don't have the data to look at on-the-job training or C schools, which is why the military to mariner program never worked. You have to have more information. And Eddie, just for you, if you pull up instructional design, there's actually one for instructional design. This is for officers and enlisted that are going into, they're not doing course design, they're doing a level above course design. So a new ship comes out, you drop an instructional designer on it, that's the individual that's helping build your training aids, your your real job task analysis comes out of this office. All these things that you see on ships, engine operating procedures where those are generated, and then they build training programs and individual courses. That's all tasks that are related to the civilian world. So you could overlay officer or enlisted, because more officers are in this world. I'm a machinery technician. I'm also an instructor from the Coast Guard. I did IDC, Curriculum Design School, the second school. If I was only looking at myself as a machinery technician, I wouldn't have any on-paper credit for doing training. I also carried a gun for 11 years with law enforcement, but I'm a mechanic. You start stacking these things together, and they make a little bit more sense. This is the most complicated thing I worked on in my entire career. So if you go to a ship, any ship, Coast Guard, Navy, wherever, and I'm sure the Army, Marine Corps have a similar thing to this. You go to a ship, you have prerequisites for working on the boat. You have to do drawings on the ship and understand the fire main system. You have to understand fuel oil transfer, raw water systems, oily waste. Because it's all safety related. You figure out where your firefighting stations are at. Those are all tasks. They're all left off credentialing calculators. So if you pull up rating forming part of an engineering watch, and this is one of the most complicated, things that they run into in the merchant mariner world, is trying to get military people qualified to get their license. In the very top left, and I broke all the links to this when I transferred out. Rating forming part of a navigation watch is the NAVIC that holds the requirements by law for someone to sail internationally as a Coast Guard recognized credentialed rating member of an engineering watch. The individual tasks to do that are listed on the left. The second column is E4, E5, E6, and E7. It's the advancement requirements. And it's super small text. You don't have to see it, but you see it. The boxes are all blank because very few of the requirements for RFPEW are in the advancement system. When you look at the C schools, engineering afloat, gas, turbine, hydraulics, nothing's there. But you start getting into the engine courses, Caterpillar, Detroit, 270, Paxman Valenta, so yeah, different courses, Caterpillar, you start seeing numbers. Those are the training performance objectives out of curriculum outline compared to the requirements in the RFPEW regulation. There's another shipboard qualification section, so fast response cutter is that third column in the middle. Almost every block has a number in it. If you get to the far right, and every column has a number, that means every requirement has been met by the individual that went through the training. So if you delete the courses an individual has been to, or that has not been to, and there's still numbers, there's no training gap. They can get their credential from the Coast Guard. That was the point. Able Seafarer Engine is the next one up. You see a lot more in the advancement requirements, a lot more in the schools. There's less in the shipboard requirements because it's classroom, how to rebuild engines, how to rebuild equipment, not operational ship. But when you get to the far right, almost all the requirements are met. Officer in charge of an engineering watch. Now you get into jobs that pay a lot of money. The shipboard requirements meet almost every requirement, but you've got to prove this. You get to chief engineer, they're all blank. Well, why is that? Because when you get to chief engineer, the tasks start manage an engine room, manage the starting of a diesel plant, manage the starting of a boiler plant. Those are position requirements, not watch requirements. So if you went back and you were the engineering officer, assistant engineering officer, engineering petty officer, that right column would suddenly be full because it's the jobs that you're required. So imagine if you're trying to put this into a database, right? It would be a lot, and it really would. Let's see. This is where using Zoom is challenging because it blocks your view of everything. So mill gears, and I hope everybody on this call has seen this program. I actually wrote this out on a bar napkin, coffee cup in San Antonio, probably 10 years ago at a CCME conference. Navy Cool, Keith Boring actually built this program. A lot of good stuff in it. In service, joining the military, transitioning, veterans. There's some stuff in it for families. It's really a database that brings the Coast Guard's or DOD's, it's really not even Coast Guard, DOD data about HR systems, your credentialing information, education systems, all that information in together, along with my next move information from Department of Labor. If you go to tools, this Navy Career Decision Support tool, Keith built this tool for me. And what I wanted to do is if you go to compare ratings, hit go, and you scroll down to, and I'll just use as an example, electrician mate, because electrician's easy, easy to understand. Electrician mate, nuclear, aviation, electrician's mate, and a gas turbine electrical. So it's 3 ratings. Now you have 4 that are all first cousins. So what you have is an electrician, and then the other 3 columns with how difficult it would be to change rating. If you were an EM and you wanted to go nuclear, how much of your current training aligns with that rating? And it's only using advancement requirements. It's not using your C schools and your actual record. So if you pulled your record in, instead of being 41%, it'd probably be 80 or 90%. Same thing for aviation electronics. Instead of being 39, it would be higher because it would have your complete record. This is a really empty tool if you're trying to change ratings. What you can't see on this tool is underneath it. When I was in the Coast Guard, I could pull, and I did this for one of our captains. Her son was in the Marine Corps and he was getting out. I wanted to go into my rating in the Coast Guard. I pulled his actual record through mill gears, and it showed the training gaps to be a second-class machinery technician in the Coast Guard. You can look across all DoD ratings, and you can find the training gap between an individual and the requirements of that rating. It also has a lot of civilian jobs in it, so you could pull civilians through the system into military jobs or military people to civilian jobs to find out how close you are. There is no PII in mill gears, so there's no individual data. It's just using the information from Department of Labor and the rating or the training information, if you want to look at the way credentials, certification, pulling that information across. So there's no individual data, but it's pretty crazy when you think about what it means. You could, with a system, and because Eddie, if you wanted to get into this, you could pull an individual into a maritime job and find a training gap and train to the gap, which we're doing with military to mariner. You could do it in other fields, or you could pull enough through that you could build a pipeline into a type of organization. Or if you were an individual going, I want to be a welder. Okay, well, let's find out how close you are to being a certified welder, hull techs, damage control techs, people like that. Let's see how close you are, and let's see if we can fill the gap. So if somebody's hiring, that's the data, and it's a mouthful, but that's the data piece that I wanted to bring up. If you're working with veterans, not asking you to know everything, but you should know that this is out there.
You know, it's an interesting data point, Ed. And what I love about that is being able to train to the gap, right? And this is where I think there's the employer's partnership, strategic partnership comes into play. There's multiple facets to this, right? You've got SkillBridge, we can train to the gap. You have multiple programs out there to train to those gaps. And you also have the employer aspect that's going to help bring and close those gaps and how they make investments as well. So yeah, love this.
Yep, and it is not discriminatory. the information in it applies to veterans, right? So I'm a machinery technician, but I can figure out where I'm at in that world. And this whole concept was really created because I used to do degree planning in 2002 for Chief Petty Officer Academy when I was stationed there. I did degree planning for the chiefs, and it always drove me nuts that the degree plans we got were based on their rating. So yeoman chief or bosunmate chief that did not include their C schools, we had to build the degree plans by hand for all the individual schools, and there wasn't a tool for it. So you could see people get shortchanged every time they went to college, and it drove me nuts. Okay, so we're going to get back on track. So see yourself, right? First thing, know about maritime, but get to know you. So part of knowing you or somebody else is knowing not what their career field was, your 88 Mike or an 11 Bravo or a bosun mate, or security forces. Not that, but who are they really in a broader sense with everything in their background, including their degrees and volunteer work. So that's a piece of it. Navy Maritime Industrial Base. We just met with these guys up in Chicago. Really good meeting. It's truly a good group. Solid folks. Small office. They do not hire, but for reference, Navy Maritime Industrial Base program. The Navy is probably less than 30% of the country's manufacturing capability, capacity in maritime. So figure 30%. They're working on supplier development, 750 initiatives across 33 states. That Navy, and it was submarine industrial base, now it's maritime because they're going broader than submarines. 33% of the industrial base is being tracked over 33 different states. They're looking to hire in this workforce 25,000 people a year for the next 10 years. And they're marching pretty hard down that road. 250,000 people, 25,000 people a year. The industrial base for the Navy is about 30% of the nation's capacity. That does not include the Build Ships for America Act, building more American ships, bringing back America's maritime dominance. So if you actually start building ships for the commercial sector, the percentage is going to go down for the Navy, but the need's going to go up exponentially. So 25,000 people a year, you can do the math pretty quick and figure out the hiring problem that our country has is you can't hire entry level and keep up with the demand for workers. You've got to lateral people in, which was the point of the career decision support tool. You have to lateral people in from somewhere, which means that they may have gap training, they may not. Sometimes you can just lateral straight into a job, but it's not necessarily entry level. It's across the board. There's just not enough time to build an entry level workforce. Things are happening too fast. So run through a few sites. And it changes just slightly. If I put it all the way to the top, I can't see what I'm doing. So if you're not familiar with workforce councils, please, 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 wherever you're geographically at, look up your employment office, look up your workforce council. Hampton Roads Workforce Council, you have a Hampton Roads Employment Center and a Hampton Roads Veteran Employment Center. It is critical that you get to know them. Sultan Camp runs the Veteran Employment Center here. Great American. They have jobs listed on their jobs board. Scroll down a little bit, you'll start seeing them pop up. They're not all entry-level jobs. More importantly, the employment centers know all the employers. They know the recruiters, they know who's hiring, and they tend to know the best and most reliable places to get work. They also have access to a lot of counseling, housing support, all kinds of things. So first thing I would say, if you're transitioning, somebody's getting ready to get out, they're retiring, wherever you're geographically going, connect with the local workforce council, whatever it's called. The money rolls from big Department of Labor through the states down to local. These are the boots on the ground folks that do amazing work connecting people at the local level. Workforce council. Jobs boards come in a couple of different types. I put stuff out on Indeed. Indeed works, Monster works, things like that. They're very clunky, and you get a lot of people. If you're an employer and you put stuff on there, you get a lot of people to put in for jobs that are not qualified, and you get turned off pretty quick and don't pay attention to them. I still do, because we occasionally get good candidates, but I probably get 30 completely unqualified candidates for everybody that's rationally looking for a job. So just know the big things, not always good. G-Captain is very good. They put more articles out than anything else. So if you want to learn about the maritime industry, G-Captain is a great place to go. They have featured jobs, but it's actually a great way to learn about the maritime industry with some of their daily updates, articles, what's going on in the maritime community, not just the mariner front side, but also legislative issues, port issues, shipping issues, construction, manufacturing. G-Captain is a great site to go to. Schools like ours, a lot of them host jobs boards. So if you go to our website, maritimeinstitute.com, you'll start seeing, and I'm not going to say mostly afloat, although the ones at the top are predominantly boat-related jobs. You do see things like recruiter pop up. Marine superintendent is not a underway job. So there's a lot of stuff that'll pop up across the board on our website. So just go to maritimeinstitute.com, jobs. The other thing that comes up, and almost all the schools do this, the big companies, you have a jobs board, but then we have our own jobs board, and you start seeing things like student services associate, and then the instructor jobs. This is part of that industry under the industry. All these things require training. All of them require education. It's not just the welder in the shipyard welding. Somebody had to drive the metal there, right? Somebody paid the bills. There's all the administrative support behind that, all the HR specialists behind that. Virginia Ship Repair Association. So if you really want to learn about maritime, major ports tend to have associations that bring all the local employers together. VISRA, they call it, Virginia Ship Repair Association, is really geared towards the big shipyards that support the Navy. But there are hundreds, and I say hundreds because the last time I looked, there were 337 companies in this one association, all in the waterfront, all in this area. They have a jobs board, and it just rolls down all the different types of jobs people are currently hiring for. And you see this is all posted in June. These are not outdated job leads. They post because it's an active board where they're hiring. And Virginia Ship Repair Association is connected to the Employment Center. So there's a lot of Department of Labor money that pays for gap training for people to go and get these jobs. And I'll show you at the end, we have a program that uses that same system. But there's training for welders, inside, outside, machinists, electricians, weld inspectors, all kinds of things. Virginia Ship Repair Association, great website. And then Virginia Maritime Association, about 450 companies on the waterfront. If you save no link today, Virginia Maritime Association created a career guide, and it's extremely good. And when you flip through it, why maritime? And then exploring the careers. The companies in the area helped write this. So these are all people looking for jobs, right? And they say here, nearly 730,000 jobs statewide tied to Virginia maritime supply chain industry. Yeah, there's 730,000 jobs tied to maritime in Virginia. Right? And then as you roll through and you get past the generic tops, you'll start seeing some of the companies, maritime training programs, trucking programs, trades, who can go, what the benefits are working for specific companies. Those companies tend to be in the Ship Repair Association, so they're in the same network, but the guide is very, very helpful. All right. And those links are here. A couple of minutes left. Military to Mariner pays really well. A lot of folks don't think about working on a ship because they've never been on a ship. We bring veterans of all sorts through this our program, but we also do gap training so they don't start out at the lowest, at entry level. National Maritime Center regulates all commercial mariners, and there's checklists. If you go to the bottom, MMCs is a company that does nothing but the paperwork to get people their merchant mariner license. They're off the chart good. They work with veterans extremely well. If you didn't want to go with MMCs, MyTags is run by Masters Mates and Pilots, extremely professional. Military to Maritime is American Maritime Partners, very professional. Military to Maritime.org, SIU, Seafarer International Union. The Star Center is run by American Maritime Officers, slightly different. All different schools, different groups that do military to mariner work. Most of them are unions that are bringing people in. They pay extremely well. They take care of their folks. We do military to mariner work, helping people one-on-one. So this is more of the one-on-one counseling, helping you find your background and where you could fit in as a mariner. The difference with some of these companies or some of these schools, like AMO, tied to the big shipping companies, Crowley as an example, Crowley has huge ships that are tied to the shipyards. I'm not tied to the shipyards in the same way. So some of these groups have first name relations with massive parts of the industry, but we all are motivated to help folks get into maritime. Last thing I'll talk about, we have a boot camp program. Nobody yells at anybody. That's not the point. It's a way to bring people in to sail on any U.S. vessel entry level, which means you could go through our program and get a job out of Singapore or Africa or Lake Michigan. As I just found out today, we've got one going to Michigan. There are a lot of these programs run by workforce councils or managed by workforce councils. So you just bring people in, give them the training based on the requirement for the job. Some of it's apprenticeship, sometimes it's just a course. Our course is 28 days. The curriculum is fixed, it's approved by the Coast Guard. So it's, very regulated for an entry-level person. Sometimes it's a bit much. But we've been doing it for a long time, high success rate. Entry-level courses. We're also tied because the success of that course is tied to somebody getting a job, not graduating. When you go to the welding training that's funded by the Workforce Council, graduating welding school is not success. Getting a job isn't necessarily success. Having a job a year later is success. So we all have a vested interest in getting people through the school and getting them jobs. Our school specifically, employment rates 96% starting salary. Military Sealift Command is $65,000. That's where most of our grads try to go. Able Seafarer, which is your first promotion after you've been there for a year, $98,000 a year. And if you're a third engineer, it's $190,000. I could have easily been a third engineer when I left the Coast Guard. I had no idea. If you don't use your sea time, it's like not getting a college degree. You leave it on the table. Please, please, please get your degree. And with that and wrapping, this was our team at the White House last year when we kicked off Task Force Movement Maritime. I actually got to go, and Pat Murphy in the front of the room. It was pretty exciting. And here's my conclusion. That's the industry. Pay attention. Do not do this alone. There are people that are willing to volunteer and help. Find your local workforce council, and there is a place in maritime if you want to work in that sphere. And we would certainly be here to help you find a spot, should that be the case. That's a lot.
Yeah,
Eddie, what
thank
are
you.
you thinking?
This was really good. I think we could spend a lot of time talking about things, and I've asked the folks here if they have so many Q&A in the chat to throw that in there. But the thing that stood out to me, quite honestly, was that this industry is quite viable. And so when we're talking to a number of people in this webinar for the first time coming out, this illuminated my thinking in terms like, wow, there's a lot of stuff here, stuff that we don't think of. So I'm a shore guy. I never go near the water, right? So I'm never gonna
Yeah,
be one of those people. I love the water and I like sticking my feet in the water, but I'm never gonna get into the water, right? So, but as those unwashed and uneducated like myself, it just kind of built for me these kinds of opportunities. If you could you expand? Because one of the things that really came out very recently was the administration's executive order on shipbuilding dominance, but it just wasn't aligned to just military shipbuilding. I think it encompassed a lot more. Can you talk more about that?
yeah. So restoring America's maritime dominance. So when you think of the ships that the Houthis are shooting at right now, right, those are not military ships they're shooting at. Those are merchant ships running back and forth in international waters.
Okay.
The Navy is there to protect those ships. Some of them are U.S. flagged. Um, China, people throw China out all the time. China's 6,000 commercial ships.
Mm-hmm.
The last time I looked at America's uh, deep water, blue water international ships, I think there were 178. They were talking about building 250. We don't need 6,000 ships. Um, so
So
the
you're
number.
thinking,
So what I heard was, and you hear numbers. So first thing you got to do is you've got to create a customer base for commercial ships, and there's a
mhm,
lot of ways the government can do that. A lot
right,
through
right,
legislation. Then you have to build the ships. And they were
right.
talking about 250. There's only 178. So when you think of 250 ships, that is a monumental increase in the commercial ship requirement for the country. You have dormant shipyards that get turned on. A shipyard may employ 500 or 1,000. You get into the Navy, 17,000. But just imagine you drop 1,000 people into a shipyard that doesn't currently exist, with
Hmm.
truck drivers and electricians and
Yeah,
HR specialists, and then the supply chain to support it, just to
yeah,
build it. That's the monumental. Like, why is there an executive order? Because it's huge. And Ships for America Act is the one you should track, not the EO, because it's a
yeah,
step down. It's more executable.
yeah.
Yeah, and that is massive, right?
Yeah, we're asking Dennis Lewis, thank you for your question. Can we please get the recording of this and Edward's contact information? Absolutely. You can find him on LinkedIn, so please get him there. And if you want to just type your contact information, Ed, if someone wants to reach out to you, but we will definitely have the recording and we will definitely have the contact information. And you'll find Ed Lewis anywhere on LinkedIn. He's pretty prolific there and happy to do that. Let's take on one last question before we got to wrap up. Is there
Yep.
anyone out there who would really love to ask a question? You can either come off the mic or you can put it in the chat. So one of the things that's really interesting for me, Ed, and probably the last type of question we'll ask, and we'll go ahead and wrap things up here, is the idea that the viability of this industry is going to be quite interesting for the next few years because of the investments that are being made. I think that's a fair statement, right? This nation is investing heavily to come back to a shipbuilding dominance that's never been thought of before. That's a fair statement, right?
That is very fair. So, in addition to the commercial shipbuilding world, like the Navy is 30% of shipbuilding, the Coast Guard's got about 48,000 people. They're about to increase the size of the Coast Guard 15,000. Part of that, you need marine inspectors in the shipyards. So right. So the government
Yeah.
piece, the regulatory piece, has to follow the commercial piece. So when you think of maritime, I'm all about mariners. I love the sea, been all over the world, love going across the Pacific. It's great. Did law enforcement, saved people, pulled somebody out of the water when I was 18. Love the water.
Yeah.
But you got to think of it bigger. You know, And I used to say the Hawaiians, people get Hawaii wrong. Americans go to Hawaii, mainlanders go to Hawaii. They go to the beach, they look out at the ocean.
Hey, you listen, the next time you go to Hawaii and you have a meeting in Hawaii, please let me carry your bags there. I think
We
I think
teach
we
there.
can we can
Yeah, yeah.
actually make that happen, right? So,
So,
but
so
listen,
the point being, we look at the ocean from the beach and look out. The Hawaiians stand on the beach and look at the land because it's where they're from. That's the
yeah,
way you got to think of maritime. It's not
yeah,
just
yeah,
one,
yeah.
it's the whole kit, right?
Yeah, and there are two or three questions. QRF Up is one of our strategic partners. I want to recognize you, my friends there. He says, "How can we collaborate?" And we're not going to be able to get to these questions. We've got to wrap things up. But I would say QRF Up. Here's the question, Ed, for maybe reaching out. If you want to reach out to Ed directly, how can we collaborate with this industry with mental health support? I think that's an amazing question. And we love our partners over there. What opportunities are there in cybersecurity? Another great question. So we're starting to get a whole bunch of them lining up here. I would strongly recommend that you actually reach out to Ed and get your questions answered there. But let me just wrap up here as we're going into this. Happy to provide the recording and links and everything that's going on. So let's do this and we'll call it a day. But let's
Yep.
see.
My email is in the chat. And yeah, I'll be following up and support VETS2INDUSTRY. They do good work. How about that
Yeah,
for a
thank
sales
you, Ed.
pitch?
We appreciate that. So
Yeah.
again, our closing. So we're just going to wrap some things up with a couple of things before so we can end on time.
Yep.
If you need assistance, and this is going to everyone that's on the call, right? If you need assistance with your resume, job search, you're interested in sponsoring and partnering with Vets to Industry, please email us at support@vetstoindustry.org. That is support@vetstoindustry.org. If you would like to post your resume on our website for employment partners, click the upload resume link that you're going to see in the chat, and you'll see the jobs listed so you can apply and where they're going to be. And they're right there on the Veteran Corner page. Veteran spouse business owners. If we have some business owners, we would love to talk to you. We created a space to share your services on our website. You can sign up for that and share with us on what that looks like as a new business entity. If you want to donate to us to ensure events like this you're attending today continue, please visit our donation page at vetstoindustry.org. Volunteer with us. As I mentioned earlier, we have an amazing volunteer army or Coast Guard for today, right? Right, Ed? So volunteer with us, pay it forward in the community we serve. We would like to invite you to our upcoming event, networking event, July 15th from 3 to 5 p.m. And my partner in crime is going to put that link inside the chat so you have that. But on behalf of the Vets to Industry, Ed Lewis, and Ed Lewis, thank you for doing the amazing work here today. Appreciate you very much. This is one of many conversations we're going to have on the topic of shipbuilding, right? We're going to partner with that. Next time we do this, we're going to get some feedback on this. We love where we're going with shipbuilding. The VA, the DoD, and certainly the Trump administration is very involved in seeing the shipbuilding industry begin to proliferate and grow. And this community plays a part. So on behalf of Ed Lewis and his organization, behalf of Vets to Industry, we wish you very well, and we wish you Godspeed and God bless you. And we'll see you the next time. Take care. Bye-bye.